to protect yourself or to take a more active role. Here's a couple of things that I think are brilliant in response to these problems. First of all, I applaud UK Uncut, which is an activist group in the UK. They have done a remarkable job in putting pressure on companies to pay taxes and to comply with the law. There's another program, a campaign out called the Rolling Jubilee, which is allowing individuals to put up small sums of money to retire debt completely off the books. This is an outgrowth of the Occupy Wall Street movement. There's also a lot of, when David Cameron talks about the aspiration nation, what I hear is the asphyxiation nation. But on the grassroots level, there are some interesting things happening in this economy. One I'm particularly fond of is this whole movement of crowdfunding, which is it's a grassroots type of approach where people are putting up very small amounts of money, £5, £10, and they're financing projects and companies and things going forward completely outside of the government. So getting back to the gentleman's question about, the government is corrupt. Yes, we accept that. There is now the ability for the population using social networking tools, internet tools, and other tools to do an end run around the government and to do a lot of very creative things that are emerging, that are a way to make the situation better. Having said that, I cannot obviously give you an individual profile. I apologize if I'm speaking in somewhat vague terms, but since I don't know your situation, it would be irresponsible to make some kind of recommendation, as you can understand.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Gentleman in the yellow.
Well, I'm just wondering there's a lot of sort of scaremongering, but is there no solution? Are we just going to wait for a big crash and buy gold and silver to avoid it? Is it unavoidable? Is there something a government can do
I think the clear policy response would be to raise interest rates to a normal level, and we saw this working in the U.S. under Paul Volcker. The stagflation of the 70s, he raised interest rates to 14%. Interest rates in this country are 1.5%, 2%. Imagine if rates went to 14%. Clearly, there would be an enormous recession/depression. However, it was needed to get rid of the rot in the system. If you're going to have a monetary system, monetary policy, and you're going to have a free market capital system as it's designed and modeled in this country the way it is, and you have to use the interest rate lever the way it was designed. Gordon Brown talked about this idea of no more boom and bust. Well, that's not capitalism. Capitalism has booms and busts. The busts weed out the weak players. The booms then follow. That's the way it is in many times in nature. That's the way it is in business. That's the way it is in capitalism. The idea of trying for the government to step in and eliminate the boom and bust cycle is an invitation to arrive where we are today. Okay, so raise interest rates. Now they're not going to raise interest rates, and the fact is that the global debt bubble, if you include the derivative market, which is an extension of the debt bubble, is $600 trillion. The total GDP of the world is $55 trillion. So you have 10 times more debt than you have global GDP. So you can't, I hate to put it into crude terms, but you fit 10 pounds of shit into a 1 pound bucket. And that's what these politicians are having us believe. It's not going to happen. Something's got to give, and it's happening now.
Wow.
This country, I think, is the point I'd like to make, is uniquely vulnerable for the primary reason that it doesn't hold enough gold, and that's going to be a big factor going forward. Secondarily, the government doesn't seem to really have a grasp of the geopolitical narrative that's unfolding with Europe. I don't think Germany has any question in their mind that they have a way now to create a fiscal union, to run that if you're going to create a fiscal union in the Eurozone, that's now 30, 40 trillion dollars of new bonds that have to be traded. That's not going to happen in the city of London. They're going to be priced in euros, and it's going to happen in Frankfurt. So that's not. So the UK is giving away. I think the city is corrupt, but it does generate some GDP. But that's not going to be generating any GDP anymore because there's going to be a pariah island off the coast of France, that people used to go to watch the Olympics. But other than that, there's not going to be much going on.
Yes, sir, in the green, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Matt. So I was having quite a good day. Until about half an hour. What can people do to bring pressure on the government to put this right? Because it's quite alarming what I'm hearing. I mean, what can people do about it?
Well, just before he answers, there's nearly 100 people in this hall, and there's another 250 turned away. Every member of Parliament was written to 3 times. Twice or 3 times, Rob? Every member of Parliament was written to twice, inviting them to this meeting. Are there any members of Parliament present in the meeting? Declare now or forever hold your peace. That's the level of illiteracy, ignorance, complacency, complicity. Here they had a chance to listen and learn from somebody who knows more than they do about the workings of the economic system they support. Not one of them came. Not one of them came to the meeting. Go ahead.
What was the question?
What could people do to bring this, obvious problem?
Well, I think, yeah, okay. I think that, as I was a moment ago, I think that I really must give kudos to groups like UK Uncut and other groups. I think they're doing a really good job. I think they've got some smart strategies now. The Occupy movement, it lacked focus, and it really had no agenda. It was just a rallying cry. But this idea of the debt jubilee, or strike the debt, then that makes sense. Occupy Wall Street, strike the debt. There's a part of that phrase now that makes sense. So there's going to be a lot more activity there, and eventually, politicians are going to go with the flow. Then one of these politicians is going to figure out that they have a bright future by backing this constituency, and they will rise up the ranks. The political process is what I would have to call a lagging indicator, to put it into economic terms. The politicians are never going to lead on these issues. They will respond. They will react. I lay out my case, and you've heard my case. Is this going to happen as I've described it? It could. But perhaps, I'm not an oracle, even though I had a show called The Oracle on BBC World News. I don't like to talk so much about the bright side of things because that tends to lull people into complacency. There are some good things, but I'm not going to focus a lot on it because I don't want you to think that there's a corner's being turned anytime soon on this. This is a dire situation that needs your full attention. Isaac Newton, he was running the economy here in this country. He brought the gold standard. Why? Because it made frickin' sense. Now you have, since for the last 30 years, you have alchemy, turning paper into fake GDP nonsense. And that bubble is popping. And where we're going to go? We're going back to where we've been for the 5,000 years, gold and silver.
Wow. Let me look around. Yes, madam.
That's right.
I don't like the idea of interest rates going up. I find it very scary.
To contrast it with the 70s and to contrast it with the interest rates, in the 70s versus today, it's a slightly different situation because you have, for the first time, really since the 70s or at any time, you have governments that have decided amongst themselves to create this global network through the G20 nations, through the central banks, of this enormous bond-backed financial, it just came out today that the shadow economy, as they call it, is $67 trillion. It's $6 trillion more than they thought 2 weeks ago. $67 trillion in this shadow economy. This is all financed by interest rates at 0%.
How?
Because the cost of borrowing to go speculate on a bond future is close to nothing because interest rates are low. And that's what Osborne and Mervyn King, that's their constituency. Those guys they want interest rates at 0 because they want the lowest possible borrowing cost to go speculate. Okay, now when the speculation goes bad, as they did with AIG or they do with these other banks, then they come to the people and say, you bail us out. Then the government writes them a check for billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of pounds, and then turns around and says, we now have $500 billion liability. We need to impose austerity. So interest rates, yes, when they're high, they have the effect of causing duress, as you described it. However, it also weeds out all the banking speculators who are getting a free ride on this economy. Now, think of it this way. I mean, if you have, certain parasites in your body, et cetera, you may take something that makes you sick, but you're willing to get that sick to get rid of that parasite because that parasite's got to leave your body. And that's what interest rates can do. It can get rid of the, what I call the financial terrorists. I mean, we can talk about that term. I mean, it's a bit of hyperbole perhaps, but there's an element in this economy, on the City of London, around the world, of bankers. Let me give you another example of how this has become an insidious, overwhelmingly destructive force. When the economy of Greece was deteriorating and falling apart, we now know from the records that banks like Citibank were sending emails back and forth to the press to circulate rumors to get the bond market to crash because they were selling those bonds short. They were making negative bets. So there's a country, an entire country, that's being tossed around in traders in New York and the City of London like a football to make an easy buck. Okay? In LIBOR scandal, multi-trillion dollar, $100 trillion scandal is interest rate related. The interest rates, there's a small differential between 2.5%, 2.75%. These banks are buying and selling simultaneously to capture that tiny spread. It doesn't sound like a lot of money, but if you spread it out over $100 trillion, it is a lot of money. And they can do that because their cost of borrowing is near 0. If your cost of borrowing was near 0, and every time you made a mistake, you got bailed out, you could be rich too. You could be, well, not rich, but you could be a big, player in this environment too. My goal is not this rich-poor dichotomy. I'm saying there's huge injustice, and